Hello, my name is Sonia. I did my post-graduation in biotechnology, and right now I'm into the field of online teaching and I undertake freelance work. So in this session, we'll be dealing with the basics of biology and we'll really see what actually the subject is. So I'm just uploading a PowerPoint presentation so that you can actually see as I keep talking about the new topics. Biology has always been one of my favorite subjects, and for every single thing, I always relate biology with my day-to-day life. Be it related with my medicine, be it related with the wonderful things which I see around, from the bacteria to the viruses, everything seems fascinating. So I'm sure that you will also enjoy biology as far as I'm enjoying it now. I deal with college students as well as school-going students. So for me, teaching is my passion and I love to teach. And I believe that I'm still a learner because nobody is born as a teacher and everybody keeps learning every day. New things, new happenings. All we have to do is just keep our eyes open and just see the things around. So my file is just getting uploaded and straight away I'll move to my topic. So here is my first slide on introduction to biology. And let me start with the basics. I'm just switching in the webcam for the time being. I just want to concentrate as on what I am talking. In between, I'll be opening my webcam so that you can see me. So let's move on. Why is the study of biology important? What fascinates you to learn biology? This is one of the best and the most important subject as part of science. And the only thing which I can tell you is that every single happening is related to science. Every single happening in life is related to biology. Be it in the field of medicine, public health, worldwide, water crisis, the formation of a new disease, the curation for a particular disease, whatever it is, every single thing is related to biology. There is not even a single field which can never be related with science. I mean, as biology as a whole too. So, if you're seeing into the philosophical study of biology, why do you think that biology is important? Because it relates with the process of evolution. It relates with the process of genetics. What is evolution? Like how we say our ancestors were the descendants from the family of chimpanzees. So we would always like to know which were the existing organisms from which we evolved. Or if you're talking about the genetics, we have the genetics like a father and a mother sharing half of the genetic systems to their offspring. If you and your wife have different characteristics, your offspring depicts a different characteristic, or somewhere closer to your parental genetics. So these are some of the parameters which are closely related to biology, and for us, these things are occurring naturally. We are not into thinking of what actually the underlying principle is. Science is the only explanation for all these things. Some of the great moments in evolution, as you can see, some of the waterborne animals and organisms could move onto the land and they could just establish themselves. As some of the examples here. Then, findings. A scientific approach to whatever the things which you see around. Making you think, or just make you to force you to ask a question. Why is this happening? What is the reason behind this? This will help you to be informed to yourself, support your cause, make it your life work. For example, if you have a disease, you are just forced to know what are the genetic basics of this. If you're suffering diabetes, you are forced to think, is your diabetes running in your family? Are your parents suffering the same? If you have a cancer, was it genetically included from the genetic makeup which you got from your parents? So, knowing the aspects of biology will really help you to figure out the things which is happening around you, as well as the things which are personal to you. So before you take a medicine, you just take on the Google and you just Google it out. What are the contents? What are the side effects of a particular content? How long can the use of a particular medicine be harmful or beneficial? So the study of biology is really important. Like, that in olden days, we were not much exposed to so much of diseases. Why is so much of diseases so prevalent now? Because of the resistance of the organisms, disease-causing organisms, be it the virus or be it the bacteria. Before, we were just given a shot of a penicillin, or we were just given a shot of a cyclosporin. But nowadays, it's seen that the antibiotics are more and more becoming resistant to the particular organisms. So what are the findings behind it? New and new advanced technologies can be imposed to solve many of the queries which are still a threat to the human life. So, as what biology, bio means life, and ology is a study, biology is a science that studies life as a whole, and it explains your complete existence in this world. Okay, so what is a scientific method in action? If you're a scientist or if you're a researcher, what is actually the first thing you do? Make an observation. You should identify that the particular bread, when exposed to the platform or just left like that, creates small organisms growing on it. So you ask questions. Why is that formed? And you form a hypothesis. Hypothesis is just an observational, a statement that can be wrong or that can be right. It is not proved. A statement which is not proved is called the hypothesis. Then you test the hypothesis. For example, as what I said, if you're testing for the piece of bread, you keep the piece of bread in different conditions. You keep it in a moist place. You observe what's happening. You keep it in a dry place. You observe what is happening. Keep it in a refrigerator. You see what is happening. So that will help us to revise the hypothesis. Like if I am stating, it's a statement or it's a stating. I'm stating that the bread mold or the particular bread, a particular form of algae forms, a form of mold is formed on the piece of bread is actually when it is exposed to the outer atmosphere. It never happens when it is in the refrigerator. You do a set of experiments to confirm yourself whether you are on the right track. Once you do an experiment, you have to testify that. You have to justify your observation by repeating the experiment a number of times until you get a different conclusion. But that will never happen if you are on the right track. And once you draw conclusions, you can just fit your statement with a particular hypothesis and you can prove yourself right. Make sure the one hypothesis that you make and the one conclusion which you arrive into can be repeated by any person under any circumstance. That is how you prove yourself, and that several of the queries of what the personal or the human life is facing has been solved in this similar way. Many of the scientists, doctors, researchers have just got into it by just making observations. I think that is what we don't have time for, making observations. That is one of the most important things in our life, and that can help you solve many of the questions which is not explained. So an observation is a thoughtful and careful recognition of an event or a fact. How does this happen? What causes it to occur? A few of the statements, a few of the things which you consider when you are thinking into observation. As I said, hypothesizing is a question which you see, the question which arises when you observe a particular observation. And you can propose possible solutions to the questions. And it must be made sure that the hypothesis is logical and it includes all the current information and least possible assumptions, and it is testable. If you are doing a set of experiments and if you have proved yourself, it must be, as I said before, that should be repeated, that should be tested under all the favorable conditions under which you have performed your experiments. So that is quite important to the fact a hypothesis should be testable under all circumstances. So you can either support or disprove your hypothesis. That's what hypothesis is, not a proven statement. It's just a statement which is made. And okay, the ways to test a hypothesis includes gathering relevant historical information, traditional observations, and experimentation. Previous studies by previous researchers or scholars can also help you to validate your observations and your experimental setup. Experiments is a recreation of the occurrence. The hypothesis can be supported or rejected. And there are different types of experiments like the laboratory, clinical trials, surveys, statistical analysis. And obviously, as we all know, laboratory trials and surveys is one of the tedious experimental set which needs to be recreated, as well as for the clinical trials. Like when the first artificial insulin was produced, we had the clinical trials so that it was made sure that the insulin is not harmful to the human being. So it was introduced into species similar organisms. So just to make the product successful in the market. Then we had the surveys and the statistical analysis on to see how the introduced product was successful or did not create any side effects or so. So experiments is a prime important element. Then we have the control group and the experimental group when you're doing a particular experiment. This is not just related to biology, this is related to every stream under science, that you have an experimental group and a control group. Control group is not being altered, and that is a dependent variable. And the experimental group is a variable which is altered, and is that the independent variable. Experiments use models, like model organisms, or particular species, or maybe bacteria, viruses. All these are experimental models which you use. If it is for clinical trials, you use rabbits or E-cells. So all these are the experimental models, and we have the experimental group and the control group. So from analyzing your data obtained for the control group and the experimental group help you to understand the experimental data, just help you to analyze your results. So then we have the experiments must be large number, it must be repeated several times, be independently reproducible. Then we have the chi-square test for the statistical significance, and also be peer reviewed by the other scientists. Theory. So when your hypothesis is being supported with experimental data, and it is being supported and proved with all your clinical trials and laboratory trials, it forms a theory. So theory is the particular widely accepted general statement about a fundamental concept in science. Like, for example, a germ theory. The germ theory states that infectious diseases are caused by microorganisms. How did we know that? We actually observed the formation of a series of diseases, and we tried to isolate the number of microorganisms which causes a particular disease, and we were able to reproduce the particular experiments or the set of experimental designs which help us to come into some conclusions. So theories can have the exceptions identified, modifications which can be made to make this more efficient. Then comes the scientific law. A scientific law is a constant fact of nature that describes what happens in nature. Like all living things come from pre-existing living things. Initially we had a belief that all living organisms arise from non-living organisms. So that was verified and was experimentally proved that was a wrong statement. And the scientific law was established which showed that all living things come from pre-existing living things. It has an inductive reasoning. And these are some of the common observations which can be generalized. One example is given here. Every bird that has been studied lays eggs, and we can generalize that all birds lay eggs. So once theory becomes established, it's used to predict specific facts. Okay, so a hypothesis, which then comes to be a theory, then comes the scientific law. Then is a scientific communication. If you have a series of set of experimental observations and data, it's important that you pass on the particular information which you have and share it with the other people. So for that, we have the journals, then we have the articles and books where the scientific details or articles are published and reviewed by other scientists and scholars. Sample experiment is given here. Go on. Sample experiment. Threatening ocean life from the inside out. What types of observations were made? State the hypothesis. Describe the experiment. So we have all the factors which finally lead us to come into a perfect conclusion which cannot be debated. Okay? That is a final scientific law. Moving on to the science of biology. Biology is one big branch of science which unifies much of natural life. It attempts to define life and reveals a hierarchical organization of living systems. Right? As we are familiar with the formation of cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organisms, and into the final organism. And a few of the properties of life are the living things are composed of cells. They are complex and ordered. They respond to their environment, can grow, develop and reproduce, obtain and use energy, maintain internal balance, homeostasis, allow for evolutionary adaptation. These are some of the basic concepts which underlie the branch of science which is called biology. And as I said, the cellular level comprising of the atoms, molecules, organelles, which finally forms the cells. Tissues, organs forming organ systems, population, species, biological community, ecosystem, biological community with a physical habitat, that the abiotic and biotic factors, finally forming the biosphere, that is the entire planet on which we survive. So, knowing the basic concepts of biology will help us to understand our biosphere or our entire planet as a whole. Cell is a basic unit of life, like I said, atoms, molecules, organelles, cells. We have the pictorial representation here. Tissues, organs. I hope it's clear from the picture that the tissues. So each tissue is a distinct to form the part of a particular organ, right? The tissues in the digestive system have no role in the formation of the reproductive system. So each specific organ system is specific in its function and its composition. Population level. Have the small population of the particular ducks or particular species, which forms a whole community, and they are seen within a particular ecosystem, and they form a part of the big biosphere. How the humans are also, just humans, every single living thing, including the humans, the small bacteria, viruses, what plants, animals, are all a big part of the whole biosphere. Levels of organization, first on the level below, and it demonstrates new features, like new properties present at one level that are not seen in the previous level. That is the emergent properties. From one level to the next level, the second level, uprising level, is going to be better than the initial level. Nature of science. Science aims to understand the natural world through observation and reasoning. Therefore, much of the science is purely descriptive, use both deductive and inductive reasoning. General principles, which helps us to make specific predictions, forms the deductive reasoning, and inductive reasoning uses specific observations to develop general conclusions. So, deductive reasoning forms predictions, inductive reasoning forms conclusions. So it's just a repetition of the previous slides. Scientists use a systematic approach: observation, hypothesis formation, prediction, experimentation, conclusion. Hypothesis, possible explanation. We have the same set of we'll see an example of the early hypothesis of spontaneous generation. The germ hypothesis was that pre-existing microorganisms present in the air can contaminate the nutrient broth. The spontaneous generation hypothesis was that living organisms can be generated spontaneously from non-living organic molecules in the broth. So this was something similar to what we observed, that from a piece of meat, the flies arose. So that was initially confused with the fact that living things arises from non-living things. So we had the final experiment where our experimental design was set up. A flask was sterilized by boiling the broth, and unbroken flask remains sterile. That means we have a neck in the flask through which the microorganisms could not enter. So with the other set of experiments, the broken flask, the neck of the flask was broken, so that there was easy entry of the germs. So as we all know, germs and organisms are seen everywhere. There's not even a single place which is devoid of organisms, except for in a laminar air chamber where there is a continuous flow of sterile air. Even then, even in that place, a single sneeze or a single cough can introduce millions of organisms. So even if you believe that washing your place or keeping your places clean with a disinfectant or an insecticide or any particular disinfecting agents can make the place clean for several hours. No, it's just for a fraction of a second, after which the new organisms once introduced can flourish, and they flourish themselves in the particular wiped area. You can never make a place 100% clean with the help of a So we have again the repetitions. An example of the scientific was Darwin's evolution. Charles Darwin was a naturalist on mapping expedition around coastal South America, and he made many observations to develop his ideas, and he proposed the natural selection. That the birds with the longer and harder beaks, he observed the Galapagos, and he found out that those birds were from a particular area where there was stronger nutshells, so that the birds developed a harder beak to crack them off. The natural selection, in which the fittest will survive. Modification of the species over generations. Over generations, there is a descent with modification. So if the first generation has genetic impairments, they are rectified, and the next generation comes up with a better option. And behavioral characteristics are always superior in the case of natural selection. This is one example. The related species. He also figured out that the similarity of the related species, the species are interrelated, but the differences can be due to the environmental conditions and natural selection. And Darwin's evidence was propagated by the population growth versus availability by Thomas Malthus. Population growth is geometric, increase in food supply is arithmetic. These were few of the conclusions and observations which were based on the experimental studies and data which has been collected for over a long period of time. And then Darwin's evidence came, and he suggested that population growth is always contradicting with the availability of resources. More the availability of resources, the population growth continues. And he realized that all members of the population survive and reproduce. That is not applicable for all the members of a particular population. It means that organisms best adapted to obtain the resources would survive and reproduce and flourish themselves. Then he figured out the fossil records where the intermediate organisms were figured out. One such example was that of the dinosaurs, and he also was able to figure out the mechanism of heredity. What were the features before, and what were the modifications or evolutionary characteristics which were evolving later on in life. We had the homologous structures. I hope you might have heard about it. They have the same evolutionary origin, but different structure and function. Like in analogous structures, they have similar structure and function, but different evolutionary origin. Some of the examples made by the comparative anatomical studies which are pertaining to evolutionary evidence. See, a human and a cat and porpoise, horse, a few examples of the homologous structures. So here we saw that homologous structures have the same evolutionary origin, but different structure and function. As you can see, humans and cats as well as bats all have the similar origin, but the structure and functional formation is different. Then we had the formation of the phylogenetic trees, which show the molecular evidence and prove the formation of evolution. So one of the important unifying theme in biology was the cell theory. That is, the cell theory describes the organization of living systems. All living systems are made of cells, and all living cells come from pre-existing cells. There is no doubt, and we cannot even imagine the formation of a particular living cell forming from a non-living thing. Just imagine the life forming from a piece of table, from a piece of chair. So those were the myths which we had before and were proven completely wrong. Single-celled organisms. See, within this particular cell, within this single cell, all the functional and organizational relations are just introduced into that one particular cell. Right? Being at a single cell doesn't mean that many of the features are not available. As far as every particular living thing exhibits a series of organization, right? Growth, development, reproduction, and all the information for the particular cell's growth, development, and death are given within the single cell. But in humans, it's multicellular organism because we have a series of set of cells which are different in function, and we have the molecular organization like tissues, organ systems, etc. So, and the molecular basis of inheritance is the continuity of life. Like the father and the mother shares a genetic combination, and the offspring gets half of the combinations from the father as well as the mother. You might be similar to you might look or you might appear similar to your father or your mother, or in case even you might look similar to your grandmother or your grandpa. So the only thing is genetics is an important factor which defines all these factors together. And one important role is played by the DNA, which encodes the genes, and these are the genes which controls the living organisms, and these genes are passed on to the next generation. DNA code is similar for all organisms. That is, DNA codes for mRNA, mRNA codes for proteins. This is just a general structure of DNA. I'm not going into the details of DNA. So the proper function of the molecule is dependent on structure. And we have the major classes of biomolecules: nucleic acids, amino acids, lipids, carbohydrates. So all these four parameters are categorized as biomolecules and is important for a particular living system. So the biology attempts to classify life's trait to diversity based on these unifying themes. All living things are classified into domains. So we have different classifications so that each living organisms are included within the particular section. It's not that plants are included together with the animals and humans separately. So based on the evolution and the characteristic features, the whole entire diversity of life is categorized into three domains: eukarya, archaea, and the bacteria. And each of the domains are again divided into kingdoms: plants, animals, animalia, protista, etc. We'll see into the details later. And this, I'm just rushing out with the topics because, as you know, it's impossible to deal a particular topic. We need to look into it into detail before you understand the basic. So we have again, even within the stream of biology, we have the biochemistry, the genetics, microbiology, we have the plant tissue culture, recombinant DNA technology. All aspects of biology comes under the wide combination of biotechnology. We have the set of gene studies which was obtained from the Arabidopsis thaliana plant and Cannabis cerevisiae, fungus, the animal studies, mus musculus. Those genetic domains have helped us to better understand the formation of life. Every cell in an organism carries the same genetic information. That is one important aspect. When a particular cell moves from this normal category, then it forms a cancer cell. Right? A cancer cell is devoid of the normal death pattern of a cell, and it exhibits 10 times faster growth and development, and they reproduce extremely fast. Control of gene expression allows cells to differentiate into different cells and tissue types, and cells also processes information received from the environment and respond to maintain homeostasis. The new properties are present at one level of organization and not seen in the previous level. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We just saw this. It's a repetition of the slide, I suppose. That's the end of the chapter. So, I just like to sum up some of the entire details as to what we have covered. It's not even a single occurrence or the surroundings which is not linked with the science of biology. Every single thing, be it your formation of a disease, be it the formation or observation of a particular organism or a particular observation which you see around, can all be related with biology. Evolution, genetics, recombinant DNA technology, formation of microbes, useful blending of the organisms to produce valuable byproducts. All these are linked with the process of biology. Okay, so there is not even a single field which cannot be related to biology. And I believe that looking around yourself can help by a number of things which can be related to biology. Things which may appear for you as natural, the underlying principle is all biology. You see the sun rises, the sun sets. You see that the plants grow. Within one night, a particular mushroom blooms up. So all these things have the characteristic features of biology, and I believe that understanding these basic forms of biology will help you make a better life. I thank you for your patience in listening to me, and I believe that I hope that you have understood at least some part of biology as to what actually is the underlying principle of biology and what are the different contents which we usually do in science of biology.